Thank you for your patience. Good morning, everybody. I hate to be standing back here, but we are recording so that we can post this on our website. We are going to turn off the recording and have some time for questions and answers at the end. So first of all, I want to thank you all for taking the time to come out and join us this morning. Thank you to Dr. Adley. Thank you to Mrs. Perrin and Mrs. Best, our Board of Ed members who are here, and all of you. I am Julie Droller, the Director of Elementary Education, and even though I am elementary education, I am passionate about SEL, started the district SEL committee and co-chair it with Dr. Scott McCarthy and Dr. Tramberg. Now that we have Dr. Dad with us, she will take over at the helm. And I am so thrilled that Dr. Dad is here. We worked together in a previous district. So when I heard that she was coming, it was like a dream come true. Many of you have maybe seen her presentation at the board or some of the other presentations that she's done in the, like, is it now 40 days that you've been here? But Dr. Alicia Dad, our Director of Mental Health. So this morning we really want to talk about it. This is about the nexus of social emotional learning and mental health and mental well-being, but really in service of preparing all students to thrive. Our agenda this morning, this is how we've laid out the presentation. I'm going to talk about more of the curriculum pieces. And again, I am elementary, but I work very closely with the department chairs and our administrative team, so I can speak to all of the pre-K to 12. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the what we learn and how we learn, and Dr. Dad will talk about the mental health side of the equation. Everything that we do in this district is based on our mission and our vision. So inspiring a love of learning in all students so that they develop as critical thinkers and innovative creators who contribute to the world with integrity and purpose beyond themselves, and preparing students to thrive in a changing world tomorrow. So everything that we do comes back to that. And when we think about our core values, really what we are focusing on with SEL and mental health is wellness. Creating balanced learning environments where all students can feel safe and healthy physically, socially, emotionally, intellectually. Diversity inclusion, where everybody feels welcome and we embrace human differences. Collaboration, working successfully toward a common goal. And respect and civility, acting with consideration for the feelings, thoughts, experience, and rights of others.
Thank you for that very kind introduction, Julie. I'm very grateful to be here, and I'm very grateful that Darien has really taken this initiative of focusing on mental health. It's not only to increase our students' academic performance, but also life skills that will help them for the rest of their life. So I'm very honored to be a part of that mission and looking forward to it. So when we talk about the nexus and what is social emotional learning versus mental health, I think sometimes mental health gets associated with mental illness, and mental health is not necessarily mental illness. When we think about mental health, it's the way in which our emotions, our thoughts, feelings, and our social well-being is in the world. So how we think, how we feel, how we act, how we handle stress, how we relate to others, and how we make healthy choices. When we are mentally well and have good mental health, we are able to realize our potential. We're able to cope effectively. We're able to contribute to our community. So mental health overall is a more holistic approach to things that impact our mental well-being. That may be within our community, within our individual homes, within our school community. It is everything we do when we think about ourselves to keep ourselves with balance and emotional wellness. So then what is social emotional learning? Social emotional learning really fosters some of those protective factors against the mental health risks that our kids are currently experiencing. So it helps develop resilience, coping skills, how to effectively engage with other individuals. We teach them direct skills on how to do this because we know that it does help reduce vulnerability to later mental health issues, such as anxiety, depression. It really helps develop a sense of self, a self-awareness for when individuals start to feel dysregulated and what they can do. It also normalizes and promotes the conversations around our emotions and what we can do. So in short, it helps, when we deliver SEL, it helps promote positive mental health outcomes for our students. By creating an emotionally intelligent school environment, it helps feel inclusive, supportive, and maintain those healthy relationships. So what specifically is social emotional learning? As I mentioned, this is an opportunity where people and adults can acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes so that they develop healthy identities. They can manage their emotions and identify and achieve both personal and collective goals. These skills are essential not only for in school, but for work, for the rest of your life, on how to really engage effectively and use your emotions to work for you rather than against you. So Julie's going to go over a little bit more in detail in a couple slides exactly what the SEL instruction looks like at different levels. But what we do know is that it impacts when we have direct instruction, and the research showing that schools that actually use SEL, students have stronger behaviors, positive behaviors. There's less discipline referrals. Their self-esteem and confidence based on research is higher than when there is not SEL instruction in schools. Also, in a more recent meta-analysis, they looked at more positive pro-social behaviors. So kids were actually engaging with other students in a more effective way and with their teachers. A decrease in behavioral problems and conduct problems. And it also, in general, improves students' attitudes, their hope. And so what we find is that if we don't do some of these proactive skills, individuals who at a younger age show mental health difficulties, those can persist. They can be lifelong challenges related to consistent employment, maintaining positive relationships. So when we can instruct kids in skills on how to regulate their emotions or identify their emotions, the outcomes are not only both short-term, but also long-term for their mental health. So some of the key factors, I'm going to turn it back over to Julie, but she's going to go over this castle model of what are those key factors and skills that are needed to foster some of that resilience through mental health. So.
Thank you. So these are the 5 skills and competencies that are necessary for success in school and in life. Self-awareness, recognizing and understanding our own emotions and how they influence our thoughts and feelings. So if something happens at home and knowing that we come to school because we've had a fight with a sibling or a parent, that is a feeling that we are bringing to us, and it impacts our learning, our memory, our attention. So we need to be aware of that so that we can self-manage, so that we have strategies that we can use to shift how we're feeling or to take a break or think about our goals so that we can persevere. Social awareness is the awareness of other people, being able to read body expression, facial expressions, having an awareness of that other people have experiences that are impacting them as well, and that we should be open to that and understand, mindful of that. Relationships, like what are those relationship skills that everybody needs to value others, to communicate well, to show them that their perspective is important, that we care about them, that we're part of a community, and that we have that bond. And then responsible decision-making, making ethical and constructive choices about our own behavior, knowing the difference between right and wrong, knowing when something is a good decision or a bad decision. So how is social emotional learning taught? So there are some ways that social emotional learning is taught explicitly, and then it is also embedded in our curriculum, in the how we learn and the what we learn. So At the elementary level, we have responsive classroom. Responsive classroom is about being part of a community. It's about how students navigate their environment, and it's a lot about classroom management to foster independence and agency. At the middle school, they have flex time. It's about, again, relationships and learning about yourself and navigating those social relationships when peer pressure is so important at the middle school. At the high school, they have advisory and guidance seminars so that kids also have a really close connection to an adult at school that spans really their 4 years, and they are building those skills. We have a health curriculum. Right now we have a robust health curriculum at our middle and high school, and it is rolling down into the elementary. But again, that is wellness. It's physical, social, emotional wellness. And then Ruler, and you've probably heard a lot about Ruler because this is our second year of implementation. Ruler has 4 anchor tools. There's a charter which talks about how we want to feel when we come to school and to work, because it really starts with us, the adults, and what we need to make sure that we are feeling that way. It's, again, having a language to talk about our feelings so that we don't just say, I'm fine. That we really, whether it's in private or to others, because it's okay, because as a culture, we don't really talk about our feelings, but making it okay to say that you're feeling great or you're not, and you need something. So that is the mood meter is another tool. Meta moment is a tool where we think about something that is not going the way we want it, and it's that pause between the action and our reaction. So taking that time to think about what we're going to do in that situation. And then the blueprint is a conflict resolution strategy. So those are 4 tools that are explicitly taught, modeled, and practiced from pre-K through 12. And then we have social emotional learning that is integrated into our academic instruction. It's how we learn, because we know that learning is social, and it's what we learn. It's the content that we learn. And this is all aligned with our vision of a graduate, which all of these skills, communication, creativity, curiosity, empathy, independence, integrity. So we think of social emotional learning as a skill, just like an academic skill such as reading. We know that we have to teach reading explicitly to all children so that they can become successful readers. Some children require more support, and we have a tiered model of intervention. It is the same with social emotional learning, and Dr. Dabb will talk a little bit more about that. But there is explicit instruction for everybody. So in our core curriculum, when you think about literature, it's all about characters. It's all about characters' traits, characters' feelings, what motivates them, why they are acting the way they do, what are the choices that they made. Using that language, again, having the vocabulary to talk about characters with those nuances of language. And then also we read because reading changes us. When we read nonfiction, nonfiction is not the truth, it's somebody's perception of the truth. So who are they? Where are they coming from? Why do they have that opinion? And are there other perspectives? And how do we synthesize all of that information to understand? So that is how it's embedded in our curriculum. In social studies, it's understanding history, it's understanding cultures and perspectives. It starts with an awareness of self. In kindergarten, we start with who am I, who's my family, who's my community, my school. And then we build onto our own history and the history of others, and where do people come from, and how do they interact, and what are the choices they make, and who are the people that we consider heroes and leaders, and why. It's scientists. What are the ethical choices that they're making, and good decision, bad decision. We debate, we grapple. We want kids to be curious, and we want them to ask questions, and we want them to learn to work collaboratively, because in life, that's how people work. And we don't get better at anything from groupthink. We need to be collaborative. So Kids need to have those skills to be successful. I think I talked about everything. This chart you may have seen before. This is how we support the needs of all students. So it's basically everything that I just said in the elementary, and I really should have included pre-K in this as well. Our approach is responsive classroom and ruler, and then school-based DBT, which Dr. Dad is an expert in and can talk more about. Middle school, flex, again, rulers for everything, school-based DBT, and the high school, I talked about guidance, seminar, and advisory.
So in education, we tend to like tiers. And triangles are nice and clean and give us a pathway of how things progress. The same is true in tiered mental health. So when we look at kind of a tiered mental health model, when we look at kind of the universal, which is applicable to all students and individuals, these are really the things that promote mental health, bring some awareness, some prevention. It can include things like psychoeducation, not only for students, but for parents and staff. What is the biological basis of anxiety, and how might it impact how we learn or how we are in the world? It also focuses on things like healthy lifestyles. What do we all do to keep our own mental health in check, whether that's things proactively like exercise or engaging in pleasant activities? It's also things like school climate and surveys. What is the climate of our school? Do kids feel supported? Do they feel connected? Do kids feel safe? Things like our well-being week at the high school, they just finished that, where we have conversations about things that you can do to increase positive emotions and have positive work-life balance. A lot of strength-focused activities that really helps individuals kind of identify when they do experience challenges. What are some of their strengths they can pull from? It's things like universal screenings, looking at our physical environment. When we design our home, we try to create calming spaces. The same is true for our students and individuals, where how can I make my space more calming and increase my readiness to learn and be present? It's also the SEL skills that we just talked about, that Julie mentioned. These are just, everybody receives kind of the skills, the conversation, our language is consistent. We have wonderful, in the short time I've been at Darien, I've just really seen so much community-based support, whether that's through the Thriving Youth Task Force, the walk that just occurred. It's those opportunities to have conversations about well-being and wellness. It's available to everyone. It's not a targeted population. It's just increasing the conversation. And then when we move up to the targeted, this is some students, not all students, but this might include things like maybe in the school there's a student who is struggling a little bit and either seeks out school psychologist, talks to their teacher, there's some consultation around, they might need some additional support. It might include some of our counseling groups that maybe are focused around social skills, focused around stress or anxiety. It's also consultation to either myself or somebody else who might have particular expertise around supporting a student with specific needs. And then it's looking at things like data we have around school climate and kind of universal screening. If we see that in general, there's a trend that sixth graders, there seems to be a little bit lower on the social awareness, then we have that mindset of, okay, this particular group or grade might need a little bit more support in this area. With always a consistent focus on how do we foster resilience. We know that resilience actually is the default. How do we foster that? And then as you go up through that tier, the more intensive, this is where you might get into more issues around mental illness. Maybe there is a diagnosed either disability or disorder, and that individual might need more direct individual counseling, outside supports, and as I mentioned, there's tremendous outside supports, whether that's private clinicians or community-based organizations, but this is when we realize that their mental health really is at risk and what kind of supports can we provide. So in general, it goes from kind of promotion and conversation to a little bit more specific targeted group, and then to those who need more intensive support. So it is a continuum. So when we look at that continuum, and we just talked a little bit more about kind of the students and the social emotional learning as a skill set to help promote and develop mental health, it is not just a student-based. So For some of you who are at the Board of Ed meeting, this is similar. I was talking about kind of how we look at mental health in a holistic approach with the assets that we have, not only our schools, but the parent and school community connection and the resources outside of school. So within that multi-tiered system, we talked about student support through SEL and various other initiatives. Family-school partnership. It really works effectively when we talk about mental health using a consistent language from home to school. What are we doing to take care of ourselves and having that conversation? So in the coming months and next year, I'm going to work on parent workshops, and I know there are already tremendous workshops that are available, but having those conversations so that when your student hears words like, I'm noticing an urge to do something, and I can separate that from an action, right? I don't always have to act on an urge I may have because of an emotion. I'm feeling stressed, my urge is to avoid something, how we can coach our kids to tolerate some of that. Also, accessible resources. We're in the process of updating our mental health resources page and really giving you guys opportunity to have that connection between what's going on in school and at home so that you can encourage and have those conversations in a skillful way with your students. Professional development. We also realize that because there is increased mental health need, it would be so effective if we can help teachers, support staff, everyone understand that this slight change in behavior might warrant I think that this might be a more mental health related issue. Do I consult with school psychologists? Kind of how do we increase our own staff's ability to notice and respond to the increased mental health needs? And then also external resources. I'm looking at if there's an area of professional development, there is a lot of conversation at the state level around trauma-focused care, realizing that some of our students have experienced more trauma, whether COVID-related or not, and how that impacts how we might engage with various individuals. So creating like trauma-sensitive school climate, those kind of trainings that might be needed. And then school community partnerships. How do we continue and grow partnerships across Darien? How do we identify the resources that are available and tap into those strengths, and where there might be a need, how do we kind of develop programming related to that need? And there's great resources across our state. I think we have we are lucky in that we have a very well-resourced mental health area of the world where we can access resources, and how do we continue to tap into those in an effective way? So when we look at it, it's not only the individual student, it's the family. In that first model that Julie put up there, you saw it kind of went from the individual student to the classroom to the school community environment and then beyond that. And so looking at that through every lens of how we support positive mental health. So how can you guys support SEL at home? The first part is practice, practice, practice. So what does that mean? It means model taking care of yourself and overtly describing that to your kids. I'm guessing many of you have coping skills that you do. Going for a run, engaging in a social activity. Identifying, you know what, I'm going for a run right now. When I do that, it actually makes me feel good. Saying that to your child. So they see that connection of what I'm doing right now is I'm taking care of my mental health. I'm moving this piece of furniture. I'm putting this picture next to my bed because when I look at this picture, it brings positive emotions. The things that we're doing, just labeling it for our kids so that we can model and practice what those conversations look like. Modeling, identifying our own emotions. If we're feeling or noticing feeling angry or sad, putting a label on it. I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling sad because I wanted to go to this thing and it got rained out. I recognize that, and I do this often, my first impulse when I get home, how was school? Doesn't usually get me too far, right? It's like, fine. So how do we more effectively ask questions? How do we encourage those questions to focus on a child's emotional experience as well? So instead of how was school, it might be, how are you feeling? What was an unexpected thing that happened today? What was the funniest thing that happened today? What was the best part of your day? What's something that if you wanted to change, what would that be? So really being mindful of when we ask those questions, we are kind of pre-programmed how was school to be a little bit more targeted to pull for some of that emotional language.
Can I jump in with also one of my favorite questions, because we never ask this. What was something that you failed at today, and what did you learn from that to build that resiliency?
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that, like, and asking the question, how did that make you feel? What was your urge in the moment to not talk to the teacher, to connecting our emotions to our urges? Ask them about ruler or advisory or flex in a kind of curious, non-judgmental way. Tell me more about that. I'm curious. I didn't have that when I was in school. And then also validating our kids' emotions to increase communication. When your child comes home and expresses some frustration, I'm really struggling, our urge might be to problem solve. Here's what you need to do. Maybe even starting with, what do you think you should do? That sounds like a really difficult situation. I hear you. You sound frustrated. What do you think you might want to do? What that does is it also conveys to your child a sense of that they have more control in the situation. It gives them some opportunity to say, I think I might try this. As parents, we hate to see our children struggling, and asking those questions about self-reflection and self-awareness. What is it that you think you might want to do in this situation? Because then they start to connect how they're feeling with problem solving. So those are just a couple things to continue that conversation. So what we are going to do, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and there are so many tremendous activities that are going on. I know this weekend there is some events downtown to continue the conversation about mental wellness. We also will be linking these resources to our mental health page on the website, but there's also 10 ways that you guys can bring home social emotional. The difference between your presence versus being present with your child, and how to foster that. There's also some great kind of toolkits about, there's a calendar of daily activities that you can do to promote mental health. And I think just normalizing the conversation about taking care of ourselves and fostering mental health and positive well-being. And with that, I think we're gonna stop recording so that anyone here can feel free to ask any questions, anything you want clarification on. So I will open it up at this point if you guys have any questions.